Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Thanks to popular demand, I'm here to bring to you the lore of Fate Kaleid liner Prisma Illya. Now, admittedly, the main reason I'd been putting this off was because, technically, the story isn't complete yet. The manga is still ongoing. That said, given there's a massive hiatus in production, following the release of the Prisma Illya movie, Oath Under Snow, I think we have a fairly massive narrative chunk we can discuss. This means any new developments will have to be covered in a later video. Before we begin, I recommend that you watch my two-part video covering the lore of Fate Stay Night, or have a pretty solid understanding of Stay Night, since Prisma Illya assumes you know it. Anyway, there's a lot to unpack here, so let's dive in. First, as usual, what is Prisma Illya? Put bluntly, it's a spin-off story to Fate Stay Night, just like Apocrypha, Strange Fake, and Extra. It takes familiar characters and ideas and presents them in a new and refreshing way. Obviously, for this one, the focus is on Ilyas von Ainsworth, the poor homunculus child who pretty much suffers all throughout Fate Stay Night by having her mom turn into the damn Grail and her father betray the family. In her original story, she's operated on to have a shit ton of magic circuits, enough to command Heracles. And even though she's a master, there's a strong chance she'll be made into the Grail herself. In her arguably happiest plot route, she's still fated to die at a young age. As a morbid cherry on top, the route Type Moon had planned for her in the visual novel was ultimately scrapped. Prisma Illya says that's a load of crap, and that Illya deserves better. Thus, it's a narrative spin-off that lets Illya lead a relatively peaceful, happy life, in which she becomes a magical girl. It's actually pretty neat when you put it that way. But, as Madoka Magica is happy to remind us, being a magical girl isn't all fluffy unicorns and candy canes. Shit can get real. And as the story develops, it gets pretty complex. As usual, we've got to tackle this with an overview analysis. While Prisma Illya is itself an alternate universe of Fate Stay Night, its story contains a second universe, called the Mii-verse, named after the character Miu, who comes from it. It's easiest to start with the Mii-verse and work outward from there, since all the pieces fall into place that way. Put simply, the Mii-verse is a universe that's suffering degradation. Mana is depleting from the world, leading to major weather shifts, natural disasters, and overall extinction of life on Earth. Basically, the world of the Mii-verse is ending, slowly but surely. In an attempt to prevent this, the Ainsworth family of mages team up with two other mage families, including the Matos, to construct their own Grail War. With it, they hope to transform humanity into a species that can survive in this inevitably desolate world. Thus, instead of the Fuyuki Holy Grail War we see in Fate Stay Night, mages instead conduct a ritual called the Ainsworth Holy Grail War. The ritual is similar to a standard Holy Grail War, but rather than summoning heroic spirits to fight as familiars, competing mages actually summon heroic spirits into their own bodies by invoking cards which contain their essences. The Ainsworth family was responsible for making these cards, basically overriding the servants' egos in the process. That way, when a class card is used, the hero in question doesn't actually take control of the user. There are two ways to use the class cards. The first is a method called Include, Limit, Expand, which transforms a mage's mystic code into the hero's noble phantasm. The more comprehensive method is Install, Phantasm Summon, which is where one's body takes on the hero's characteristics. Let's talk a bit more about the Ainsworth family specifically. Their first head is a bipolar mage named Darius, who's kept himself alive for 1,000 years by residing in his descendants, a process called conceptual replacement. He's kind of similar to Zokin that way. By the time of the Fourth Ainsworth Holy Grail War, the current head, Zachary, gets killed in the fighting, and his personality is put into the body of a doll. The next generation of Ainsworth mages consists of 3 kids, Julian, Angelica, and Erica. Of them, the family curse passes to Julian, who becomes the next head of the family and host for Darius. Turns out the Ainsworth family is pretty used to making and utilizing dolls, because Angelica winds up dying and also gets incarnated into a doll's body. In fact, it's a bit of a family specialty, taking dead folks and making them into family servants. Anyway, during the Fourth Grail War, Julian has been trying to find a vessel to serve as the Grail and contain its power. By the end of the Grail War, he tries to fulfill the ritual without a proper vessel, and unleashes a black shadow upon Fuyuki City. To his surprise, this shadow gets nullified by the powers of a young child, Miu. How? Well, Miu is a child of the Sakatsuki family, who have long been a religious cult that worships children as being closest to God. From this worship, Miu is a special child with wish-granting capabilities. When she saw the shadow, she basically wished it away. Dispersing it drew attention to her, attracting the Mii-verse's version of Kiritsugu and Shiro. Turns out, the Kiritsugu in the Mii-verse is pretty damn similar to his Fate Zero counterpart, and that he wants the Grail in order to save the world, albeit through different means than the Ainsworths. In that endeavor, he's pretty cold-hearted, and doesn't care about Miu as a human being. He still adopts Shiro in this universe, but unlike the one we know, he actually teaches his son all about magecraft. This results in a version of Shiro who's way stronger from the onset than we're used to. Let's step back a bit and explain why the hell a little girl is being called the Holy Grail. If you recall Fate Stay Night, the Grail everyone's coveting in the war isn't the actual Holy Grail, but rather a vessel to hold a shit ton of mana, way more than anyone could gather on their own. For the first 3 wars in Stay Night, they used a literal cup with mystic properties, but even then it failed to safely contain all that mana. That's when the Ainsburns stepped in and decided to use their own homunculi as the vessels instead. That's why Airi was referred to as the Grail, and that's why Illya in that universe can also be used as the Grail's vessel. Well, in the Mii-verse, they don't have the Ainsburns to make a living vessel. What they do have is Miu, whose heritage makes her a candidate to be the Grail. Basically, her body is special and can actually hold all the mana needed to activate wishes. Thus, without her choice, people look at her and see not an ordinary girl, but a tool for them to use, which totally sucks. So yeah, Miu's ideal to be used as the Holy Grail, and both the Ainsworth family and Kiritsugu want her for that purpose. Of them, Kiritsugu is the one to find her first. He and Shiro take possession of her and keep her isolated at their estate. Kiritsugu urges Shiro not to get emotionally attached to her, knowing full well that she's to be sacrificed for the greater good. Regardless, Shiro can't view Miu that way, and secretly gives her books to read and learn from, as well as some adorable kigurumi. Eventually, just like in Fate Zero, this Kiritsugu dies after having a final talk with Shiro, except now the cause of death isn't clear. From that point on, Shiro and Miu begin treating each other as genuine siblings. Beyond having actually learned magecraft, Mii-verse Shiro also has a different school life. He doesn't meet Shinji Mato, and as a result he stays in the archery club, along with Sakura at school. Shiro hangs out with the student council president, who isn't Issei, but actually Julian. The two have a mostly symbiotic relationship, even if Julian treats him like crap most of the time. He's a grumpy fuck. They're able to keep up this peaceful existence until Julian discovers that Miu has been living with Shiro all this time. The timing on this is awful, since Julian confronts Shiro while he's trying to take Miu outside the Emiya estate to visit her parents' graves. Julian's pissed that Shiro and Kiritsugu were the ones who stole Miu when he was looking for her, and Shiro's pissed that Julian was the one who unleashed the shadow on Fuyuki. They fight, and Shiro tries to protect Miu, but fails when Angelica attacks him while invoking an archer card. She's a sexy female Gilgamesh, yo. Anyway, Miu gets kidnapped, and Shiro is saved by the Mii-verse version of Kirei Kotomine. In this universe, the church is a shell of its former self, just observing the end of the world, and Kirei gets his life's enjoyment by running a ramen shop that pretty much only sells Mapo tofu. Regardless, Kirei fills Shiro in on what the Ainsworths are up to, how the Grail Wars went down, and what Kiritsugu was hoping to achieve. It becomes clear that if Shiro wants to rescue Miu, he's gonna have to win this 5th Ainsworth Holy Grail War. Problem is, Shiro doesn't have any class cards. Instead, he's got Sakura, who actually intends to give him her own archer card, effectively betraying the partnership between the Ainsworths and Matos. That's when Shinji attacks with the assassin card, invoking Hassan into his body. Sakura tries to protect Shiro, but but is shocked to discover that her card doesn't embody Gilgamesh like she thought it did. The Ainsworths knew she was going to betray them, and intentionally swapped out her card for a fake. Shinji takes advantage of this and kills her. Shiro takes the card and links himself to it anyway, installing the abilities of Heroic Spirit Emiya. You could say that Heroic Spirit Emiya is empathetic to Shiro's plea for the power to save his loved ones. It's a very rare thing, and Shiro's certainly lucky he has a version of himself in the Throne of Heroes. In this way, Shiro fights through all of his opponents in the Grail War. There's Shinji, Atrum Galeasta, the guy who was originally Medea's master in Stay Night, Karyamato from Zero, as well as Kenneth L. Malloy Archibald. Thrown in the mix is Beatrice Flowerchild, a childhood friend and obsessive fan of Julian's, who now serves the family. Apparently, all of these mages already died previously, and are being used as dolls to fight on behalf of the Ainsworths. Lastly, Shiro defeats the doll form of Zachary Ainsworth and wins the Grail War. He gains access to the Tenno Sakazuki Cavern in Mount Enzo, where Julian tells him that by saving Miyu, he's essentially betraying the world. By this point though, Shiro doesn't care. If saving Miyu is evil, he will become evil incarnate. Shiro finally reunites with Miyu, but she's upset because she found out that he and Kiritsugu were originally planning on using her as a mere tool. Shiro apologizes, explaining he's made plenty of mistakes, but is now here to protect her as a real brother. Having gathered enough class cards, he wishes upon the Grail to send Miyu to another world where she can be happy. While Miyu is being warped away, Shiro faces down against Angelica, and even without a class card, he can still use Emiya's projections because he inherited them through fighting in the war. Thus, Shiro is able to counter Angelica's Gate of Babylon with his version of Unlimited Blade Works. At least until she whips out Aya and uses Enuma Elish. All of his swords are able to hold Aya back, just long enough for Miyu to escape their reality. Unfortunately, it turns out that Shiro was only as strong as he was this whole time because Miyu had wished for the two of them to be real siblings. Thus, he was getting extra mana from Miyu. Now that she's gone, the connection is broken, and Shiro is defeated by Angelica. The Ainsworth family takes him prisoner from then on. At the same time, upon turning age 10, Miyu's wish-granting ability goes away. Miyu winds up in a universe similar to her own, but not suffering the same deterioration. She leaves Mount Enzo and wanders the streets at night. As it turns out, this is the main universe of Prisma Illya, which I'll call the Illya-verse to keep things simple. This is a happy universe in which Kiritsugu and Airi managed to put an end to the Holy Grail Wars. About that, the Ainsburns, just like usual, were intending to make Illya into the Holy Grail, and for 8 months, they poured knowledge of magecraft into Illya, subconscious knowledge needed for her to act as a vessel. Kiritsugu and Irisfield decide that Illya's life is more important than the Ainsburns' ambitions. So they halt the process and spend their days preventing further Grail Wars. They want their daughter to live a normal life, so Irisfield seals away Illya's subconscious memories. She thinks she's done a great thing, but she doesn't realize that by sealing off those memories, Illya will grow up with a second personality, laying dormant within herself. Regardless, Illya on the surface does lead a normal life, being looked after by her maids, Sella and Leisrit, and living happily with Shiro as her adopted brother. Kiritsugu and Airi are rarely around, since they're still out preventing Grail Wars. It's important to note that Shiro in this universe knows nothing of magecraft, and neither does Illya. Now, I want to stress something about the lore here. Prisma Illya's mangaka, Hiroshi Hiroyama, has officially stated that we as viewers shouldn't get too caught up comparing Fate Stay Night to this new universe. I presume this means the author is taking creative liberties to make a story that's fun without stressing details too much. I see that coming about by the fact that in the Illya-verse, Illya apparently isn't a homunculus, but a normal human child with a healthy lifespan, the same as her mother. It's logically inconsistent, but honestly that's okay. Or is it? Tell me in the comments. The main conflict of the series is that, along with Miyu, 7 of the class cards also make their way from the Mii-verse to the Illya-verse. The Mages Association picks up on this and wants to obtain the cards since they're causing distortions in the mana ley lines in Fuyuki City. Beyond that, they have no idea where the cards came from or how they can be used. Regardless, the Mages Association wants to collect them and eliminate the irregularities they cause. At first, they employ one of the association's top enforcers, Bazette Fraga McRemitz, to seek the cards. She's damn strong and manages to secure both the Archer and Lancer cards by fighting the hollowed-out servants contained in them. The association is kind of a mess though, with higher-ups fighting for power. So the ones in charge of handling these class cards change, and Bazette is taken off the case. Heading this endeavor is the famous mage, Kisher Zelrech Schweinorg, one of the few mages to actually obtain a true magic from the root. His is the second magic, Kaleidoscope, which allows him to access and draw magical energy from parallel worlds. He uses this to create two very powerful mystic codes, the Kaleidosticks, Ruby and Sapphire. These conscious magic wands are able to grant high-level magecraft, even to people who've never studied it. Zelrech must have a thing for magical girls, as these sticks transform their users into magical girls, complete with cute outfits. Waver Velvet, Lord El Malloy, works at the clock tower and relays messages on behalf of Zelrech. Again, don't stress the details. It isn't revealed how this world's Waver winds up inheriting the El Malloy title, so we shouldn't worry. In this universe, Rin Tosaka and Luvia Jelita Edelfelt are promising mages at the clock tower, and are thus chosen to prove themselves by gathering the class cards. Rin is entrusted with Ruby, while Luvia gets Sapphire. It's not that Rin and Luvia are bad mages, but rather the Kaleidosticks are necessary for them to fight on par with servants. By this point, they are only aware that the cards can be installed into the Kaleidosticks, transforming them into noble phantasms. They've yet to analyze the card's full potential. There's just one problem though. Rin and Luvia are rivals who can never seem to get along. Right after arriving in Japan, they start fighting each other. Clearly not doing Zelrech's bidding, Ruby and Sapphire decide to break their contracts with them and seek new candidates to be magical girls. Before long, Ruby has chosen Illya, sensing her wish to be a magical girl like the ones on TV. Sapphire, on the other hand, finds Miu at a nearby park and makes a pact with her. Rin is left with no choice but to help train Illya to get the class cards on her behalf. Luvia, on the other hand, decides to have Miu adopted into the Edelfelt family and lives with her in a giant mansion she builds right across the way from Illya's house. In return, Miu takes care of household chores in a cute maid costume. Some interesting changes include that Taiga Fujimura is now Illya's teacher instead of Shiro's, and Kirei's estranged daughter, Karin, serves as church ambassador while pretending to be the school nurse. As a result, Illya and Miu are the new magical girls, while Rin and Luvia serve to mentor them. When it's time to procure a class card, they transport themselves to a separate plane from their world, a mirror world, and face off in combat against the card's respective servant. Because the class cards are made from stripping the egos from heroic spirits, these servants are basically empty doppelgangers of their legends. After defeating them, the card can be collected, and even used for future fights. Let's talk about Miu again. The one person she cared about, her brother, sent her away so she could live a normal life. But now she's alone and entrusted with this dangerous mission. Thus, she starts off acting really cold toward Illya, and only after having to cooperate do they start to become very close, loving friends. Miu and Illya learn the basics of using the Kaleidosticks, but shit gets real when they face both the Caster and Saber cards back to back. The combined efforts of Rin, Luvia, Miu, and Illya all fail to subdue the Artoria Saber servant. Eventually, Illya is pushed to her limit, and the dormant personality within her takes over. She becomes almost a new person, installing the Archer card and vanquishing Saber with unlimited blade works. Miu sees this and realizes it's the same type of fighting her brother Shiro used to save her. This is a temporary incident where Illya's other self, Kuro, breaks free from being suppressed and fights on her behalf. Afterward, Illya gets her body back and doesn't even remember what happened. Later, when fighting Assassin, Kuro emerges again to survive an onslaught of daggers and almost kills Rin, Miu, and Luvia in the process. Illya now fears these powers of hers and quits being a magical girl, even though Ruby still hangs around. Irisfeel makes a surprise visit home to give Illya a pep talk, which convinces her to re-enter the battle and help Miu defeat Berserker. With that, they've retrieved all the class cards. So now what? Zelrech thinks Rin and Luvia are still too toxic to be his pupils, so he has them hang around in Japan another year. Turns out, the ley lines in Fuyuki aren't returning to normal like they should, so the crew has to inject mana into the ley lines themselves. The mana rebounds, putting them in danger, and Kuro emerges from Illya again to save them. This time, she doesn't just take over Ilya's body, she actually merges with the Archer card and escapes, becoming her own entity. This sounds cool, but Kuro is edgy and wants to kill Illya, convinced they can never get along. Kuro's pissed off that she's been sealed away so Illya can live normally, and so she feels she's become an outsider in her own life. Furthermore, if Rin and Luvia are to complete their mission of obtaining all the cards, Kuro would have to give up the one thing that's allowing her to exist. Sadly, without Kuro being inside her, Illya's magecraft is weaker, which sucks when Kuro continually attacks her. In addition to violence, Kuro's also looting all of Illya's friends for mana transfers, making out with them all to stay alive. Do recall that these girls are 10 years old. These scenes are animated better than most hentai, for crying out loud. Anyway, to stop the whole murder thing, Rin and Luvia capture Kuro and place a human blood seal, a Malficium, on her so that any wounds inflicted on Illya will also hurt her. Kuro can't kill Illya without killing herself. As a result, Kuro just kind of forces her way into Illya's life and tries to replace her. Eventually, she stops pretending to be Illya with a tan, and instead goes by the name Chloe. Irie shows up again, and this drama comes to a climax. They all sit down in the bath and resolve their differences. With the facts laid out, Illya fully accepts Kuro, and she's allowed to live with Illya's family as Chloe. Sadly, just as this is decided, Kuro begins to vanish from mana depletion, and not even Illya's makeout session can save her. Ultimately, Kuro is saved by her own powers as a wish-granting vessel, granting her own wish to stay alive. Nice! I must say though, Irie is surprisingly useless during this confrontation. It's really irresponsible since she now has 2 daughters, and one is literally disappearing forever. Fate Zero's Irie was very affectionate and concerned about her loved ones, whereas Prisma Irie is very much an airhead. Also, it's kind of funny how every girl so far has strong feelings for Shiro. Illya and Kuro are brother bangers, or want to be anyway. Rin and Luvia think he's hot stuff after meeting at school, and Miu adores him since he's just like her brother in the Mii-verse. Seems to me like the best way to become the harem master is to first become best housewife. I guess that's fine, since he's basically a punching bag throughout the series. With that out of the way, some assholes at the Mages Association try to go around Zelrech's back and reassign Bizette to collecting the class cards. She visits Japan and promptly begins to assault Luvia's mansion in an effort to take back the cards. Bizette is already powerful as it is, but her best attack is Fragarok, her own noble phantasm that activates when an enemy unleashes theirs. It rewrites the flow of time and counters by striking the opponent in the heart. She uses it on Miu and nearly kills her in the process. The girls are all knocking on death's door when Rin reveals that there's an 8th card and holds that information hostage to force a truce with Bizette. So far, these cards have been the same as the servants in Stay Night, so we as viewers can guess from the process of elimination that this 8th card is the Gilgamesh one. Rin and Luvia prepare a tunnel to go beneath the ocean floor to reach where the card is hidden. Illya, Kuro, Miu, Rin, Luvia, and Bizette all face off against the 8th card. It takes all their teamwork to match the mindless Gilgamesh Phantom. This guy's unique though. When the Ainsworths made his card, he didn't lose his ego. Instead, he was unintentionally split apart, with his knowledge and conviction escaping in the form of Kid Gil. His main goal is mainly to reclaim his own class card and restore his Gate of Babylon. For this, he merges with his phantom form and transforms into a giant torso that absorbs Miu. To defeat it, Illya makes a contract with both Ruby and Sapphire, powering herself up at the expense of permanently damaging her nerves. Thankfully, this doesn't happen, and while Illya wins, Gilgamesh disappears along with the 8th card. At this point, everyone is enlightened to the fact that Miu and the cards came from another universe. After a brief peace, the crater left from their fight begins to serve as a distorted entryway to the Mii-verse. From it, Angelica and Beatrice emerge to steal back Miu. Beatrice uses a berserker card holding the spirit of Magni, son of Thor. She uses Thor's arm to wield lightning and the hammer Mjolnir. Anyway, Miu is abducted, and Illya finds herself alone in the Mii-verse, separated from the others including Ruby. Turns out all of them made it to the Mii-verse, but not in the same place. To keep it simple, both Ruby and Sapphire are hiding in the Ainsworth Atelier. Rin and Luvia become brainwashed housemaids, and Bizette and Kuro take longer to show up. Before long, Illya encounters Tanaka, a bizarre amnesiac girl with mysterious powers, such as being invulnerable to physical wounds. The only thing she remembers is the need to stop the Ainsworths. Kid Gil also shows up and explains that he wasn't really fighting Illya out of spite when he merged with his egoless self. In fact, their goals are now the same. Their mission? Rescue Miu, of course. It's fun seeing other stuff Gil keeps in the Gate of Babylon besides just swords. With them, they sneak into the Ainsworth Atelier and find Mii-verse Shiro locked up. He's overjoyed to learn that Miu managed to make friends. Conveniently, Gil wants to fight Angelica because she's using his card. Elsewhere, Illya fights Beatrice in the main hall, which is surrounded by mystic codes. Ruby happens to be hiding among them, and Illya pulls it out in desperation. Even so, Angelica and Beatrice prove too strong, forcing them to retreat. They're joined by Kuro and Bizette to make their escape. While they're resting, Erika leaves the Ainsworth Atelier to find and meet Illya. She chills for a bit before Darius himself comes to pick her up, using that as an excuse to break through the school's barrier. Darius uses various noble phantasms from unnamed servants, including Apneic Beauty, to seal Illya in an ice dome. While she's trapped, Tanaka approaches the barrier with an insanely high body temperature, melting her way through. Regardless, Darius is strong, using another noble phantasm, authoritarian personalism, to distort gravity and pin everyone to the ground. He attempts to stab Tanaka with an unknown dagger, but stops when she utters the word counterfeiter. In fact, he decides to spare them and returns to the Atelier. For going against his plans, Darius takes his anger out on Erika. Gil explains that he's never heard of the noble phantasms Darius used, despite having the predecessors to what should be all noble phantasms. When he gets back, Darius performs creepy rituals on Miu, forcing her blood to reveal some kind of scriptures on an altar. The purpose of this has yet to be revealed, actually. That night, Illya gets brainwashed and kidnapped by Angelica. Her consciousness is placed into a stuffed animal, and a false consciousness is placed in her actual body. Erika honestly thinks that she can offer Illya's emotionless body to Miu and make her happy. Regardless, Illya must learn to control her stuffed animal form and solve her predicament. She finds Luvia and Rin, who attack her, and even reunites with Sapphire. Ultimately, Illya uses what little magecraft she can, as a doll, to strike a transfer seal on her actual body. This sets her back to normal. Illya and Kuro are forced to fight Angelica. In battle, the Ainsworths use a type of displacement magic called Flash Air, which lets them move objects between portals. During their fight, it's finally made clear that the Ainsworths need Miu to save their world. Illya realizes she can't choose between Miu or her world, so she instead resolves to try and find a way to save both. Obviously, this naivete doesn't fly well with Angelica, so the fight resumes. Rin and Luvia are freed from their brainwashing. Gil breaks Shiro out of prison, and Kuro makes a path for Illya to reach Miu. As Darius spams ambiguous noble phantasms, Illya finds an opening and strikes him with Rule Breaker. All of his magecraft cancels out, causing their atelier to swap with mountainous ruins, as his body reverts to that of Julian. Julian reveals Pandora's box, which he is now using as his ultimate holy grail. He gains Erika's trust before having the box drown her in dark mud, which flows forth, spawning an army of heroic spirits. Mii-verse Shiro shows up in an act of pure badassery. He and Kuro break through enemy lines, defeating even Angelica. As Julian's last line of defense, he brings out Sakura, who has been turned into a doll. She fights back using an installed Berserker Lancelot card. Her mind is broken, and Julian can only control her by taking Shiro's image. Sakura and Beatrice incapacitate Shiro, mortally wounding him. Thankfully, Rin has a pendant just like she does in Stay Night, and uses it to heal Shiro. Apparently, it's been Julius's aim to actually open Pandora's box, but requires both Miu and Illya to do so. At the very least, we can say that Tanaka is a weapon made to prevent this. She wakes up at the school and throws a sword into the battlefield, her own arm actually, that Illya wields to defeat Erika's link with Pandora's box, halting the mud. In the end, Julian takes Erika, who's now been transformed by the mud, and flees with Beatrice's help. Angelica has been abandoned by her creators and is taken in by Illya's party. After such a chaotic battle, our heroes finally have a moment of peace at the Emiya estate. Where do we go from here? Julian is still plotting, and the Mii-verse's past is finally disclosed for everyone. I'm sure Prisma Illya will continue, but for now, this is a relatively cohesive place to end my video. There are still some major questions regarding Pandora's box, Tanaka, all those mystery cards, and the fate of the Mii-verse. Are you hoping to see what happens next? Be on the lookout for a new season, or switch to the manga. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like, comment, and subscribe to OtakuDaiKun for more anime lists, reviews, discussions, lore videos, live streams, and the holy waifu wars. If you're interested in seeing this channel grow, please consider becoming a patron or donating in a super chat during any of my weekly live streams. Also, feel free to check the description for my social media profiles, including an ever-growing Discord full of fans of anime and the Fate series. Until next time, celebrate your fandom!